This is Defiance Daily Dispatches for the Defiant. I am your host, Miles Taylor, and we've got a lot of news to talk about today. First and foremost, the First Lady did something today completely unexpected. She walked out and did sort of an ad hoc press conference without taking any serious questions on a bombshell issue. We're going to tell you about that today. We're also going to talk about breaking news that just happened before we came on the air, which is that a federal judge ruled that the Pentagon must restore the press access of media organizations it kicked out. That judge had previously ruled that they had to let reporters back in, but Pete Hegseth's Pentagon basically wanted to send them out to a woodshed when they came back into the building. Now a judge has said no. I'll tell you a little bit more about that when we get further in. And then we've got more updates on Iran. Bombshell reports, two of them that uncover just how much the Trump administration is detached from reality when it comes to that war. We'll also be covering developments on ICE targeting a newlywed service member and his wife and the backlash to that. And with us today, later on in the program, to talk about that is Charles Booker, a former Kentucky House representative who is currently running for the United States Senate. And amidst all of this, with me today, I have again my guest co-host, Marisa Georgiou of the Grounded podcast with John Tester. We are thrilled that she is on the program today, standing in for the lazy Xander Schultz, who never shows up for work. I don't know what's going on. We'll see Xander next week. Let's go to that first story. Let's go to that first story about Melania Trump, because this was a curveball today. No one was expecting a Melania Trump press conference today anywhere in Washington, D.C. or around the country. And before we get into those details, we need to address something that happened at the White House when she showed up at the podium. It caught reporters off guard. It raised a whole lot of questions on an issue that the White House was already very sensitive about: Jeffrey Epstein. In an unscheduled appearance, and despite being there, no new reporting out there in the public domain about an event tied to Epstein or Melania, she called reporters in to make a statement about that disgraced financier and alleged human trafficker. During the conference, Melania stated to the press that she had no relationship with Epstein, was not a victim of Jeffrey Epstein, and had no knowledge of his crimes, framing the appearance as an effort to clear what she called years of rumors and false claims about her past. In the course of that public statement that she made at the podium, she did acknowledge that she and Donald Trump moved in the same social circles as Jeffrey Epstein, and that she had crossed paths with him at events in the early 2000s while maintaining those interactions. One remark stood out to me when she said this, quote, "Epstein did not introduce me to Donald Trump," she said. "I met my husband by chance. This initial encounter with my husband is documented in my book," unquote. She also addressed past emails with Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's associate, calling them casual. But those emails, already reported in the Epstein files, show friendly exchanges signed love, comma, which she is now trying to explain. And then at the end of her remarks, she shifted the focus outward, calling on Congress to hear directly from survivors. Take a listen. Not sure if we have the audio to that clip. Sorry for that, folks. Working on getting that. Give us 1 second. This is the clip of Melania Trump calling on Congress to hear directly from survivors. Well, we may not have that. We'll get back to that in a second. But this was surprising to folks. This was very surprising because why is the First Lady going out there publicly and continuing the Epstein saga, a saga that's been so damaging to the White House? Some people at first suspected that Melania Trump was going rogue and maybe trying to resurrect the scandal even further to damage her husband. But to an astute observer, it was something else. It was something else, and it seemed like she was trying to get ahead of something. Perhaps, as others speculated, to get ahead of damaging reporting that further ties the First Lady and the president to sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Now, of course, what makes all of this notable is the timing. This ad hoc press conference comes 1 week after Pam Bondi was ejected from the Justice Department as Attorney General and is now refusing to testify in front of the House Oversight Committee despite a direct subpoena. I want to bring into the conversation my guest co-host today, Maritza Georgiou. Maritza, this is a weird one. I did not understand why Melania Trump was out there. It did feel like she was trying to get ahead of something. What was your read?
Yeah, I mean, initially it was like, why now, right? The timing is so bizarre, especially when her husband, the president of the United States, does not want to talk about Jeffrey Epstein. How many times have we heard him say, it's time to move on, it's time to move on. And you go out and you bring the attention back on this when we've all been talking about the war with Iran. And it just made me think of Shakespeare, Miles, that the lady doth protest too much. Because why would you pull this attention back unless something is coming down? Yes. The timing really, really stands out to me. And then to talk about the emails, I mean, to say that she had no relationship with them, the emails I've read show a pretty chummy relationship. I mean, she wrote "Love Melania" in one of them. So that's not just somebody, if I ran into Melania Trump on the street and gave her my email address, I don't think she would send me an email that said "Love Melania."
I mean, are you sure though, Maritza? Are you sure? I think you all would hit it off. You would win her over as a source, and then we'd have a lot more breaking news about this whole thing. We might even have an answer for why she did this. I've got to agree with you on the emails. I mean, after this happened, I saw screenshots of some of those messages. I mean, she doesn't email Ghislaine Maxwell in some formal, stuffy tone. She calls her G, right, by the first letter of her first name. You know that when you're emailing people like that and just using the first letter, it's a form of endearment and familiarity. I wouldn't email Barack Obama and just say, "Yo, B, what's the latest? BO, what you doing?" I wouldn't say that. So, I mean, there was clear familiarity here and an obvious sensitivity to her ties to these people. I mean, look, you can't, at this point, if you're the first lady, you can't undo what's already been done. This bell has been rung, baby. Thousands of mentions of them and their family in these Epstein files. And the photos, these ain't people they met at a 7-Eleven.
You're right. And the thing is that she went on and on about, you can't trust what you see and be very careful about what you believe. I mean, my goodness, these are not new photos. These are not new AI photos. Meanwhile, her president husband mocks up how much on AI, throws it out on social media and laughs it off. Like, he's putting out dangerous fabricated photos all the time, making accusations. So why now is she coming out and saying this when these photos are documented of them all hanging out together, of them being together? So it's just, that was bizarre to me. It was bizarre to me that the White House press corps had no clue what this was going to be about before it happened. They had no clue what she was going to come out and say. And then the president on a phone interview right after said he didn't know she was going to do that. What is going on? Like, I would love to hear from you, knowing what you know about the inner workings of a Trump White House, of like what that might have looked like behind the scenes and the chaos that I can imagine in my head.
Well, I will say there was not great connective tissue in the past between Melania Trump's office and the executive office of the president. So the one thing I want to disabuse folks of is the notion that there's really intensive and close coordination between those offices. There actually isn't. And it's pretty much highly dependent on whoever is the chief of staff over there. I'll say that the only time in my experience there was decent connective tissue was actually when it was Stephanie Grisham that was in charge of Melania's operation, because she knew most of the people over on the president's side of the operation. So there was more coordination. However, on an issue like this, the single most explosive issue of corruption in the administration, this is not one of those things that would happen without the knowledge of the executive office of the president and the president himself, period. Full stop. Almost no exceptions to that. The things that would happen that the rest of the White House wouldn't know about were things like Melania was going to do an appearance tied to her Be Best campaign. And folks would say, I didn't know she was going to do that today. And I don't care because it has no impact on policy making related to Russia or China or anything along those lines. This has enormous implications for everyone on the White House side of the operation. The counsel's office that's defending the presidency against these charges, political affairs, communications, all of these offices that are supposed to protect the president and support his agenda would need to know if the first lady was going to go out there and drop a bombshell about Jeffrey Epstein. So I think we can safely say someone here is already lying. Not a surprise in this White House. But I'll go back to Maritza, what seems to be the likely explanation here, which is there is probably somewhere brewing a bombshell news story, a major report, an investigation from Congress, some document that's not yet out there that the First Lady of the United States is aware of. And she's trying to tell a different story before that story comes out. I would be damned if it was any other version of events besides that one. They know something's coming and they want to tell their story first so they're not caught on the back foot. The question is, what is that thing?
That certainly makes the most sense to me. I think that seems like the most reasonable explanation. I will say this, though, about the First Lady, Miles. She talked about the victims. And it's the first time I've heard anyone in her family talk or reference the victims in a way that mentioned them getting their day before Congress. So, I mean, I guess that's a silver lining of this.
Well, let's listen to that. We do have the clip now. Let's do the clip of Melania mentioning the victims.
Now is the time for Congress to act. Epstein was not alone. Several prominent male executives resigned from their powerful positions after this matter became widely politicized. Of course, this doesn't amount to guilt, but we still must work openly and transparently to uncover the truth. I call on Congress to provide the women who have been victimized by Epstein with a public hearing specifically centered around the survivors. Give these victims their opportunity to testify under oath in front of Congress with the power of sworn testimony. Each and every woman should have her day to tell her story in public if she wishes, and then her testimony should be permanently entered into the congressional record. Then, and only then, we will have the truth. Thank you.
You know, at first blush there, Maritza, it seems like, wow, she did something that flies in the face of what this administration has been doing. Rather than trying to cover this up, she's urging more transparency. She's urging the survivors to testify. That's what I thought at first. But here's the caveat to that. She's calling on Congress to do its work. Hold on one second. If she's insinuating that there are other culpable parties here, high-profile people, she says, have stepped down from their positions, why does Congress need to investigate? The Justice Department should be investigating. The FBI should be investigating. So it was notable to me that while she was calling for transparency, she was punting it over to Congress, the body that's not going to be able to get much more of the truth than has already been put out there. The investigative organs of the government are underneath her husband. So that was noteworthy.
Well, and as we are watching this whole drama play out with now former Attorney General Pam Bondi and whether she's going to show up and testify as she was subpoenaed to do so. So, yeah, I mean, this is absolutely within the DOJ. The DOJ has failed the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein time and time and time again, as our friend Ellie Leonard points out pretty much every single day she does the work digging through those files and digging through those emails. So where is the DOJ? Why are we continuing to kick this can down the road? Why are we continuing to pass the buck? I mean, if we want justice, I mean, I don't know that justice will ever fully be served, Miles, because Jeffrey Epstein is dead and they can't look him in the eye in court. But if we want at least the most amount of justice that could possibly be seen, there needs to be a thorough federal investigation, and we can't just keep along saying, oh, well, there were no co-conspirators, or, oh, we don't have anything else, or we're not going to release any more information, or we're not going to bring Pam Bondi before Congress again because she's not the Attorney General anymore. I mean, this is just ridiculous. Quit the cover-up. This is something that is not going away.
Yeah. Look, I'll say a final thing on it, Maritza, which is that I think some people they get tired of hearing Epstein saga, or they code it as political language. Well, the Democrats are just talking about Epstein because it's harmful to the president. Well, I'll tell you, as someone who's not a registered Democrat, as someone who's an independent, this is about the actual investigative organs of the government. This is about abuses of power. This is about the biggest political cover-up in modern American history. A president has obviously abused his power to keep damaging things coming out, and continues to abuse his power on this issue to prevent people from being held accountable. Let me remind folks that the Trump administration shut down the investigation, an investigation that apparently the Southern District of New York said there were multiple co-conspirators they were looking into. They came into office and shut this down. That's pretty crazy. We still don't have a clear answer for why the Justice Department suddenly, once power changed hands, figured out, well, there's nothing else here, despite millions of pages of files, dozens and dozens of witnesses, dozens more who haven't been interviewed. They just ended it. Well, this can't end. We're not going to stop talking about Epstein because this single issue cuts to the core of the abuses of power Donald Trump is perpetuating that are doing foundational damage to our republic. And let us not forget that in those files, there are accusations that the sitting president of the United States raped a 13-year-old girl. Accusations that should be pursued, accusations that should be investigated, accusations that he should have to testify under penalty of perjury to address. None of that has yet happened. So, Maritza, we will not shut up about this. We will not stop encouraging our colleagues to go out there and investigate it. And in fact, we have supported some of the organizations, including Defiance.org, grants to different independent media organizations that are continuing to investigate these files, and that will not stop.
And I think too, as long as we're wondering what is behind this and what is happening behind the scenes, I also think it's interesting that Melania Trump is even involved in this, because all of the chatter has been about the DOJ, has been about the 13-year-old girl, has been about Donald Trump's involvement. And yes, there are rumors that we've heard for a long time about, Melania potentially being introduced to the president by Jeffrey Epstein. But that is not the big thing that people are worried about or talking about. The big thing people are worried about and talking about is the abuse of little girls. So for her to come out and do this, it's just head scratching, Miles. I like, and the specific words she chose, even talking about the CEOs, the powerful men who have stepped down, she's just putting a spotlight back on this. And it is completely, it's puzzling. It's puzzling.
Very puzzling. I don't think this is going to be the end of it. I have a sneaking suspicion, Maritza, this story is going to balloon somehow. We don't know how, but we're going to be following it closely. We'll go on to a much smaller story, a less controversial story, a story no one is paying attention to this week. That's Iran. Of course, I'm joking. We're all paying attention to this because earlier this week, the president threatened genocide against an entire country of people. And that situation has not settled down since, because over the past 48 hours, a clear picture of what actually led to a 2-week ceasefire, a fragile ceasefire between the United States and Iran and Israel, is starting to come into focus. But before we get to that, I want to take us back to 2 weeks ago, when Donald Trump had this to say about negotiations with Iran on March 26th.
Watching the Wall Street Journal's fake news and all these stories that get printed like, oh, I want to make a deal. They are begging to make a deal, not me. They're begging to make a deal. And anybody that saw what was happening over there would understand why they want to make a deal. But they say, oh, we're not talking to them. Anybody would know that. And only a total fool. And they're not fools. They're very smart, actually, in a certain way. and they're great negotiators. I say they're lousy fighters, but they're great negotiators. And they are begging to work out a deal. I don't know if we'll be able to do that. I don't know if we're willing to do that. They should have done that 4 weeks ago. They should have done it 2 years ago. Or they should have done it when we first came into office, because 2 years ago they had free reign under Biden, Sleepy Joe.
Begging, the Iranians begging for a ceasefire. Well, new reporting, folks, that has surfaced contradicts that. For weeks, the Trump administration had been leaning on Pakistan, according to new reporting, to try to convince Iran to agree to a pause in fighting, one that would include reopening the Strait of Hormuz. According to the Financial Times, 5 people familiar with the diplomatic back channel say those efforts date back to at least March 21st, 5 days before that clip, and the same day that Donald Trump publicly threatened to bomb Iran's power plants, which means that even as he was escalating his rhetoric in public, behind the scenes, his administration was begging, trying to create the conditions for a ceasefire. Those efforts moved through intermediaries, with Pakistan playing a central role, and as a Muslim-majority neighbor seen as beneficial to the White House, was tasked with selling it to Tehran. And the reason for that urgency is not hard to understand, because Iran's control of the Strait of Hormuz had created enormous economic pressure and continues to, disrupting global energy markets and driving up costs in ways that are feeding directly back into the U.S. economy, directly back into Donald Trump's legacy. And Trump has been getting destroyed by people here at home because of the effects of that war, including inside his own MAGA coalition. That strain is starting to show. And those details help explain what we've been seeing play out over the past few weeks, where his threats keep escalating, and then the deadlines shift to the right and shift to the right and shift to the right. And now with a ceasefire partially in place, talks are expected to continue later this week in Islamabad. But even those are already under strain, with both sides accusing the other of violating what is, at best, a very threadbare agreement. Trump was trying to save face to the American public, but ultimately knew Iran had the power in this deal. Now, what we're all left wondering is, how did this affect the current ceasefire deal? I want to bring on Maritza again to talk about this and dive into what the current deal actually is, because Maritza, there's a whole ocean of difference between how the White House is describing Donald Trump's negotiating prowess and what the Iranians are claiming to have achieved in these negotiations.
Yeah, it seems that neither side actually knew what deal they were signing on to if you listen to both sides. And again, this brings up the point that we talked about the other day, Miles, which is, who do you believe here? I mean, who can we actually believe here to tell the truth? I mean, that cabinet meeting that you shared the clip from, that was the same cabinet meeting, I believe, that he said, I just don't care. And then went on a whole big tirade. Well, I mean, just a storytelling session really about his favorite Sharpie markers and pens. And later on, the executives at Sharpie said, well, we're not aware of any conversations that took place like that. I mean, who do we believe in any of these, whether we're talking about Sharpies or this peace deal? And meanwhile, what has been accomplished in Iran? We have how many people dead? We have how many people wounded? The Iranian people are not free. Adam Kinzinger put out a statement along these lines earlier this week. Like, there's nothing here that is actually better for anybody. Iran basically just opened a toll booth. And Donald Trump currently, Miles, is on Truth Social. I've been monitoring it, unfortunately, all day. He's been on some rants, another series of rants on Truth Social, and even just an hour ago said, there are reports that Iran is charging fees to tankers going through the Hormuz Strait. Well, yeah, no kidding. That's what we've been talking about for days. And he said they better not be. And if they are, they better stop now. Like, they're not listening to you. This is just mess. It's a sloppy mess. And I have no idea what's going to happen over the next 2 weeks as we continue to watch this happen. But it seems like nobody really understands or is agreeing on what they all apparently agreed to.
Especially because on Truth Social, Maritza, when this ceasefire deal was struck, Trump basically reposted the terms of it, which seemed to make clear Iran was going to be doing, as you described, setting up a toll booth that didn't previously exist on the Strait of Hormuz. So, for people to understand here, this war started not because the Strait of Hormuz was closed, where global oil flows through. It was open. This war was started because Donald Trump said he had different aims, regime change, and then it was the ballistic missiles, and then it was their nuclear weapons, and on and on and on. And now the thing he supposedly got with his extraordinary deal-making prowess of threatening genocide was the reopening of a strait that was already open when the war started. But worse than that, I mean, here, Maritza, is just some of the key bullet points from Iran's proposal that Donald Trump said that they had accepted as the terms for negotiation. Sanctions lifted globally on Iran, the release of frozen Iranian assets, the right to continue uranium enrichment, not an end to their nuclear program, the right to continue uranium enrichment, no future attacks from the U.S. or U.S. allies, the U.S. military withdrawal from the region, compensation for war damages, control or oversight of the Strait of Hormuz. This was reported that day. Donald Trump knew they were going to be charging tolls, and proposals to do exactly that, add tolls on global shipping through the strait. That was reported the day of the ceasefire. Donald Trump can't be pretending on Truth Social today that he didn't know that. What strikes me is he's furiously trying to backpedal because he's realizing, even among his former supporters, that people see this as more than a shitty deal. They see it as a big L. They see it as a huge loss. And Donald Trump is trying to pretend he somehow didn't know that that's what he had agreed to.
Well, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And at one point he even said, like, oh, well, they're going to use the money to rebuild. I mean, he's just all over the place. It is nonsensical, and you can't even follow it from one Truth Social post to the next because he contradicts himself. This whole Miles, I mean, just so many threads to pull on. I'm losing my train of thought because there's so much to talk about here. Just so much to talk about. Let's also talk about the fact that the regime is still in place, and yet we actually gave them a younger Ayatollah who's more extreme. Right.
Donald Trump says there was regime change. We changed from an older Khomeini to a younger one, so that they didn't have to worry. They didn't even have to worry about instability during generational shift. We did it for him. We put the young guy in power, and we made the Iranian people who had been defecting from the regime and opposing the regime now support their government. Many are saying we're supporting our government because they're defending us. I mean, that's exactly the opposite of what we want to see when it comes to this conflict. So, it's just absolutely bonkers. The one thing I want to jump back to, Maritza, that you mentioned is Trump's claim that the Iranians would use these tolls to repair their country. He seemed to tout that. And then he seemed to allude to the fact that the United States was going to team up with Iran to also charge tolls and that we would make a bunch of money. I want people to understand this. The oil going through the Strait of Hormuz is oil that ends up in your gas tank and other people's gas tanks around the world. If Iran is charging for it, if the U.S. government is charging a tax on it, that gets passed off to you. We're not making any money. You, who already can't afford to fill up your tank, are going to be paying more money, and some of that is going to Iran, the country we just bombed. That's ludicrous. I don't care if you support Donald Trump and you're a 3-time voter or you've hated him since the beginning. That's just stupid. No one would say that's a win for the United States. And so it's another reason, I think, Maritza, that the ceasefire is so fragile is Donald Trump and his coalition are waking up to how bad this is, especially among their base. I think trying to find a way to get out of it or somehow negotiate better terms.
Well, I know what. I have a great idea. Let's send out Melania to talk about Epstein. I think that's a great way to stop the chatter about this deal and why it's actually going to cost us more and actually gave Iran more. It's just crazy. And am I correct, Miles, in understanding that the sanctions we lifted aren't just recent sanctions, that we've lifted sanctions that go back all the way to like multiple decades ago?
That's what the Iranians have been saying to the United States from the start, I mean, that's what's so jarring about this, is the Iranian demands have actually been known for quite a while. And if you now put together the timeline, the Iranians had this wish list, which was, for any American president, would obviously be an immediate no. Because some of the sanctions even the Iranians want relief on, the president of the United States can't give them relief. They're passed by Congress. They're permanent sanctions and would need an act of Congress to undo. They're asking for the moon. So Donald Trump for weeks was trying to get leverage, was trying to raise his rhetoric, was threatening genocide. And by all accounts, it sounds like the Iranians just didn't budge. They said, no, these are still our demands. Donald Trump's rhetoric got louder and louder and angrier and angrier. Finally, he realized it wasn't doing anything. And so then he made it sound like, I got us a great deal. We're going to use their document to negotiate from. This is catastrophic for U.S. national security and American influence to have said yes to negotiate on a document like this. The United States got nothing from this war and lost everything if you merely believe what Donald Trump himself has reposted and what the Iranians have posted. Maritza, I also want to dive into another report we have here, released today, that further pulls back the veil on those White House falsehoods. So CBS released a report revisiting the deadliest Iranian attack on U.S. forces since the whole war began and what soldiers on the ground say actually happened. So as a reminder, for weeks, the Pentagon has described this March 1st strike in Kuwait that killed 6 service members as a case where a single drone slipped through the defenses of a fortified U.S. base. Now, remember the infamous bizarre squirter comment that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth made, where he said that one of the weapons got through an otherwise secure system. He says sometimes you have these squirters. Anyway, according to these exclusive interviews, that's not what happened. Survivors of that attack, speaking anonymously to CBS due to strict military media restrictions, are now telling a different story. In fact, one injured soldier told CBS News, quote, painting a picture that one squeaked through is a falsehood. The unit was unprepared to provide any defense for itself, this supposedly hardened facility. He says it was not a fortified position. It was a unit left fully exposed. And on the morning of March 1st, troops had already taken cover after missile alarms sounded and a ballistic missile passed overhead. Once the all clear was given, according to this report, around 9:15 a.m., soldiers removed their gear and returned to work inside a makeshift operations center built from wood and tin against armed drones. About 30 minutes later, a drone hit that workspace directly. 6 service members were killed. More than 20 were wounded. Now, survivors describe immediate chaos, the smoke, the fire, the severe injuries, soldiers trying to treat one another with whatever they had. And according to those same soldiers, the vulnerability didn't start that morning. They didn't somehow become more vulnerable. In the days leading up to attack, most U.S. forces in Kuwait had been moved farther from Iran's reach. But this unit was sent in the opposite direction to a smaller outpost at a port, a location one soldier had already identified as a potential Iranian target. In other words, they were sent into the line of fire. And when they got there, the defenses reflected an older kind of war because that base was surrounded by steel reinforced concrete barriers designed to absorb blasts from rockets and mortars. But those systems were built for Iraq and Afghanistan, and they offered no protection from aerial attacks in a conflict now defined by drones. I want to get your reaction to this, Maritza, because we hear a story from the Pentagon about one thing in this war, then we hear another, hey, they were in a fortified position, we never put our troops in danger. It's quite significant that troops are now speaking out. I mean, one of them said, quote, telling the truth is important. We're not going to learn from these mistakes if we pretend they did not happen.
Well, the first thing I thought of when I read this, Miles, was Benghazi and the Benghazi hearings and how Congress grilled then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton because they wanted answers on how that could have happened. Well, where are they now? When we talk about who to trust in this, Iran or the Trump administration, I trust these troops. I trust them not only because they lived it and they experienced it, but think about how brave they are right now, speaking on conditions of anonymity, putting themselves on the line. And you know that the president is going to come out and threaten them for talking. because it violates, whatever he believes in, and it's going to go against what his administration is saying. But I think they are incredibly, incredibly brave. And it also reminds me of the father of the fallen service member who also spoke out and said, no, I never told the president that he should finish the job, unlike what the president was touting. So I think that we needed to, these are our brave men and women serving our country. We talk about protecting our troops, supporting our troops. Well, now's the time to do that. And if they're saying that this was not safe, not fortified, and explaining the horrors they endured, we need to be listening to that. And I hope Congress demands, at the very least, a hearing, but we need some accountability here.
Donald Trump's Benghazi. I think you're absolutely right. Well, we're not going to let off of this one. I have a sneaking suspicion on that as well. We will continue to be talking about that controversy. We go into our final story today, Maritza, which we want to talk about because this is another issue that the Trump administration has been trying to escape from amidst the war with Iran. Much like the Epstein files, they've hoped the distractions overseas will keep Americans from talking about the political controversies here at home, including with ICE's abuses of power. And with the firing of Kristi Noem as an attempted makeover of the Department of Homeland Security, ICE's ruthless tactics and arrests that once overwhelmed the headlines have sort of gone underneath the wave tops. But as we know, just because something isn't across every news channel does not mean that the Trump administration is not continuing its actions. Case and point. Newlyweds, Annie Ramos and Matthew Blank, just last week, while reporting an army base where the two were to live, reporting to an army base where they were to live and to start their lives together, as Blank trained for deployment, ICE detained his wife, Annie, his fiance, then turned wife. The past week has been a nightmare for the couple, with Blank's family fighting tirelessly for the release of his wife. Luckily, there's been a strong development in the story, but not without damage. ABC News has the update.
Breaking news, ICE has released the spouse of a soldier who was detained at the base he's stationed at earlier this week. Annie Ramos, wife of Army Staff Sergeant Matthew Blank, came to the U.S. as a toddler. He says she was taken into custody by ICE agents at the base they planned to live at just days after they got married. Congressional correspondent Jay O'Brien joins me now for more. Jay, what more do we know?
Yeah, Ike, this was just released. It comes to us from our Armando Garcia, who covers immigration for us. Annie Ramos appears to have been released from an ICE detention facility not far from the Army base where she was first detained. I want to read to you a little bit of a statement that came to our Armando Garcia. She says, quote, as Matthew, her husband, Staff Sergeant Blanc, continues preparing for his long career in the military, my focus now is on securing my status, continuing my studies, and building our life together. She goes on to thank the family and friends who surrounded them with prayer. She says, quote, because of them, I am home. This all started just about 5 days ago when she and her new husband went to a base office to essentially check in to apply for military spouse benefits, et cetera, et cetera. It came to pass that Annie Ramos was undocumented. She came to the U.S. as a toddler. She had a removal order from a judge when she was about 20 months old. She's lived her entire life here in the United States. Base officials called ICE, who detained her, and up until today had her slated for possible deportation. We don't know exactly what changed in her case in the eyes of the U.S. government, if there will still be deportation proceedings, but what we know right now is that she has been released from ICE custody. Ike.
Jay, any reaction from the government?
So far, none. It's worth pointing out here, the Department of Homeland Security, when she was first detained, put out a statement saying that Annie Ramos was detained when she was attempting to, as they put it, enter a military base. And then they went on to say, quote, this administration is not going to ignore the rule of law.
Maritza, there's a lot we could say about this. We have a guest today that we're going to ask about this controversy and everything else happening. But I'll just remind folks that the administration came into office saying we were going to go after the gang monsters That's what Trump called them. The criminals, the terrorists, the violent individuals. That was the focus. His deportation plan was about violent criminals, not kids who were brought here, the wives of service members. This has all gone too far. And here to talk with us about it today is former Kentucky House of Representative and Democrat Senate candidate Charles Booker. Charles, it's great to have you with us. You're running for the United States Senate. You are surely hearing from your community the outrage over ICE, Trump's abuses of power with that agency. Give me your reaction to this story. How should Americans be thinking about it?
I'm telling you, people across Kentucky and across the country are furious. We're all exhausted. We're heartbroken. We're afraid. And people have had enough. And that's why so much support is pouring from all corners for my campaign, because we're lifting up humanity. And one thing is abundantly clear: ICE has to be abolished. There is no reforming this. This is essentially an agency that is operating as Trump's personal army, and they're inflicting terror across the country. We're seeing it here in Kentucky, where a lot of my immigrant loved ones are suffering in silence. People are afraid for what the future holds for them, and justifiably so, because they see what the Trump administration is doing, and it has to stop.
Charles, I think Miles started in on this, but I can't tell you how many times I interview people who just say to me, yeah, but they're just going after the worst of the worst. They're just going after the worst of the worst. And then we bring up stories like this one, or of little Liam Ramos with his blue bunny hat and Spider-Man backpack, and asking how those folks are the worst of the worst and deserve this. Have you found a way to get through to people who continue to believe that line?
You know, I think there is a place where we all wish that what is happening was not happening. And Donald Trump has definitely carved out a path for a lot of people where he is such an evil villain. He's like the worst character in any movie you could have ever watched. And it continues to shock the consciousness of folks who are like, surely that can't be what's happening. But he's pulled the curtain back. He has shown in very clear terms exactly who he is and what this is. And honestly, this isn't about us getting through to people. It's us lifting up their voices now, because lifelong Republicans, people who have never voted before, people who, again, just wish that we weren't where we are acknowledging what is in front of us, which is why at these No Kings demonstrations, there are people from all backgrounds. And it's also why people who have never voted Democrat before, folks up in the hollers who have Trump signs, have put Booker signs beside them. And a lot of them have been taking those Trump signs up because they see what this moment requires. And it hurts that we are at this point, because lives are being lost, people are being terrorized. They're creating this deportation industrial complex. But it is giving us an opportunity to stand together as Kentuckians. And my Senate campaign is reflecting that as a tribute. And it's why we're in a lead position to win this race.
Charles, I gotta tell folks that there's a choice here when things like this happen. I mean, folks might be tempted to say, well, the case of this newlywed, sometimes ICE agents get it wrong, or, there's just so many people in the country illegally. Of course, you're just going to hear about these bad stories. I'm going to tell you from firsthand experience, in multiple Republican administrations, working for multiple DHS secretaries, almost all of them start their morning with the news clips, things relevant that have happened in the Department of Homeland Security throughout the department. There is no conceivable way in which Mark Wayne Mullen, the new DHS secretary, did not start off this morning seeing that news story. There's no way. He absolutely saw that news story. And one of two things could have happened. Either sees it, skips past it, moves on to other things. But usually secretaries of Homeland Security use that moment where they see a story, if it does shock their conscience, like you said, to turn to the staff and say, why the hell did this happen? Why the hell are we doing this? How the hell are we going to fix this? And if they're actually concerned, they light a fire under the asses of their subordinates and policy changes. Doesn't look like that happened in this case or in many other cases. This is the policy of the Trump administration. If they're not lighting a fire under the asses of their staff and saying this is wrong, if they're letting these things go forward, then yes, it's the policy of the Trump administration to detain and arrest the wives of U.S. service members, to go after young children, as Maritza mentioned. That is their policy. You can say it is officially their policy. That seems to be, as you note, getting through to voters. I mean, the folks that you mentioned, the former Trump voters that are now putting up Booker signs. On what other issues, Charles, are you seeing a sea change on the ground? In addition to ICE, are there other areas where folks are coming up to you at these rallies and saying, I just can't do it anymore. We need change?
Absolutely. And it's what gives me hope. I know these are dark times. We have to be very honest. Democracy is not only our pursuit of it at risk, but we don't have the luxury of sitting this out. The Constitution is being ripped up in front of our faces, and people see it. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of folks across Kentucky and communities like ours have always seen it. It's just that politics doesn't touch us. We aren't the folks that get listened to. A lot of people feel ignored and abandoned, and that's why my mission of lifting up voices from the hood to the holler has been so powerful, because it's the spirit of the Rainbow Coalition. It's us organizing on our common bonds. And truthfully, across the board, we're seeing how people are realizing that we're getting crushed. Like it's hard to afford to keep the lights on. A lot of people are struggling to afford their medicine, to keep food on the table. The cost of gas, the cost of fertilizer, the cost of living is crushing a lot of people who are already hurting even before Trump's madness. And it's lit a fire in a lot of people who feel urgent to stand up now, especially with a campaign that is listening to them. I don't come from politics. I don't trust politicians, and I'm really focused on organizing through community, the power of standing as family. And it's resonating because I think people across the country know we have to do something different. And we're providing that opportunity. And I'm asking everyone to come to charlesbooker.org and join this movement, because this is bigger than Kentucky. And of course, if we flip Kentucky, we flip the U.S. Senate, and we can stop a lot of this madness.
Yeah, it seems, I mean, we just continue to see the Senate become more and more in play as we progress throughout this year and as the madness continues to escalate in Iran. Charles, I wanted to ask you, though, you posted this morning about a story that I've seen pop up, but I bet it's going under the radar of a lot of people's news feeds because of everything else happening, but that there will now be an automatic registration for the military draft starting in December. So what do you make of that? And do you think people are paying attention to that? Do you think that's on people's minds where you live?
Well, one of the main tactics from Donald Trump is to overwhelm you, throw so much mess at you that it's hard to keep up. And I know that a lot of people are feeling that. And look, we still need to be talking about the Epstein files. I mean, what's happening here? And so I know that there's a lot of light that has to be shown on what Trump and their administration is doing. And that's why I wanted to speak to that, because while they're actively trying to make it harder to vote and blocking people from being able to register and have access to the ballot box, they're also saying they want to not only make registration to the draft automatic, they're trying to force our loved ones to go into these wars that make no sense, that are causing havoc across the country and across the world. And we have to do something about it. And part of doing something about it is telling the story and lifting up the voices of people who get ignored. And I'm proud to say that working people across Kentucky are understanding what this moment requires. And I pray that our country can meet this moment and stop this madman and protect democracy.
Well, look, Charles, I think Maritza said it, that the Senate is more than just a body that we're going to be watching to see what it does in the next couple of years. It may well prove to be the decisive factor in whether or not the Trump administration's policies continue or not. And if you get elected to that body, you may be the break, my friend. Final question for you before we let you go. I know you've got a campaign to run. When you're looking at the after story of the Donald Trump era, what needs to happen in the United States Senate, the House, the reforms that are needed to keep this craziness from happening again? Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. I think Americans are coming around to the view that a president should not be this powerful. What do those reforms look like? What are you telling people needs to happen when this chaos ends?
Well, there's going to be a lot of repair that will have to happen after this madness ends. Years of it, of the damage is generational. And a big part of what we have to do with the Senate and our Congress, because there need to actually be checks and balances, we have to get big money out of politics. Elon Musk put $10 million into the Senate race here in Kentucky, supporting a JD Vance 2.0. And they're trying to buy democracy in front of our faces. It has to stop. We have to end Citizens United. We have to make sure that these members of Congress aren't going there to enrich themselves. And thankfully, regular people see the moment, which is why I'm actually tied with the guy that Elon Musk gave that much money to. And my average contribution is $26. But we have to shore up democracy. We have to break down the barriers to the ballot box. We have to impeach and remove Donald Trump in this rogue, predatory administration. And finally, make sure that money is not drowning out the voices of regular people. That's the foundation. And then from there, you lift up Medicare for all. From there, we support universal basic income. We do the work of ending generational poverty. But we have a lot of shoring up to do, which is why we're going to win this race and get to it.
Charles Booker, former member of the Kentucky House of Representatives and now candidate for the United States Senate in a crowded field, a competitive race, and one that could decide the control of this country in more ways than one. Thank you for joining us, my friend.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Charles.
Maritza, we go. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to tell you that comes up in so many conversations that John Tester and I have. It's money in politics and the Citizens United decision, and it is something that is, it's just so prevalent in every single issue we discuss.
That's actually a really good point to remind people if they are tuned in today. And if you are not currently a subscriber to or a follower of the Grounded podcast on Substack with Maritza Georgiou and John Tester, former U.S. Senator, please go subscribe. They are fantastic. They are amazing. I love to watch them while I'm on a walk, while I'm on a run, while I'm on a car ride. You guys are great. You also, by the way, Maritza, you two have an amazing rapport. Y'all are both like, you can toggle between very serious and irreverent and right back to very serious, which I love because that's our world right now. We got to be able to laugh still, but we also have got to be able to dig below the headlines.
We have to, and we're really good at jabbing each other. Like, we're really good at making fun of each other. But as I've learned with John Tester, if he's not making fun of you, like when he does that, that means he likes you. So we have a good teasing relationship that way. But we are talking. I should just plug that we are talking all about money in campaigns, money in politics, and Citizens United with Heather Cox Richardson on Monday. So that's nice. In the evening. Hope you'll join us there. Yeah.
Fantastic. Folks absolutely should. Well, we go to our final segment of the day and every day, Maritza, which is who is joining the Defiance. Now, I hope it's you, viewers out there. If you're not already a member of defiance.org, probably a better subscription to have than Netflix if you want to save your democracy. Now, you can still subscribe to Netflix, but we would urge you to go check out defiance.org and consider becoming a part of the Club for Courageous Americans. 100% of your contributions, your member dues, go toward the fight to protect our democracy, or just subscribe at defiance.org for free to see our updates and to find out how you can fight back against Donald Trump's abuses of power. But there's someone else today who's joining the Defiance. A couple of people I want to highlight, actually. One is Florence Welch. If you don't know her, she's the incredible lead singer of Florence and the Machine. And she has decided to bring with her on tour, Maritza, Planned Parenthood. They're going to be teaming up with her on tour. Why? Because the Trump administration has seemingly gone to war on the issue of reproductive care and information. They want to take us back to the Stone Ages where people didn't know that they could get contraceptives and didn't have access to that care. They're sort of doubling down on this crackdown. In fact, one worrying story from yesterday is that the Trump administration is trying to gather medical information about all U.S. government employees, including whether a U.S. government employee on government insurance and their family members have had abortions. That's pretty scary. I don't know why. We still don't know why Donald Trump and his administration want to know who inside the government or their family members have had abortions. That's scary that the White House wants to have access to that information. So Florence Welch is doing something very cool, bringing Planned Parenthood on tour to send a message. And this also, by the way, comes in the wake of the boss, Bruce Springsteen, doing something similar. I mean, he's been highlighting a lot of the administration's abuses of power, talking about ICE on his campaign, on his tour around the country. This is sort of becoming a trend, is that artists who were kind of scared to talk about this stuff for a while when Trump came back into office. Now leaning into it. I don't know, Maritza, what do you make of it?
Well, I think that we're just going to continue to see this. And you have, yeah, like you said, the boss. I mean, he's just been an incredible voice in all of this. Now we have Florence and the Machine. Love her. But also think about people who've been politically activated for a long time. I mean, friends of our show, Pearl Jam, they're very involved and very vocal, and they stand in solidarity a lot with Bruce Springsteen. Rage Against the Machine. There's this new up-and-coming country singer. If you guys don't follow him on Instagram, you have to. His name's Brian Anders. He has a whole concert basically coming out to say country music doesn't stand for this. Country music is not about ICE, is not about the Trump administration. He's getting a lot of hate for it, but he's trying to redefine what country music looks like. So I think we're seeing more and more people feel emboldened and activated to say something, and they have an audience. And, you know, the deal is that Trump is going to continue to attack these artists. And so his base is going to have to decide, do they want to listen to good music or do they want to listen to Kid Rock?
Yeah, that's true. You know what? That's what you get, guys. You get a broken democracy and you get Kid Rock on a loop while you live in an autocratic hellhole. That's what you get if you're listening right now, folks, and you don't go do anything to get out.
I'm blanking on the other singer who was like, Ted Nugent. You have Ted Nugent, Kid Rock.
Yes. If you don't, so that's the message to Americans right now. If you don't get out the vote, if you don't do what we talked about yesterday on our weekly mission brief, which is actively try to help protect your democracy, then you are signing up for years and years of Kid Rock and Ted Nugent and Donald Trump and the spawn of Donald Trump. Doesn't sound very fun. Doesn't sound very fun. Get out there and get active, folks. Maritza, I also wanted to give, I'm going to call this honorary mention, maybe, because I'm not sure she's joining the Defiance. But we don't just use this segment to highlight people who already probably have left-leaning politics. We often highlight people who've broken with the tribe on the Republican side. And there was a very significant defection this week, which was Megyn Kelly. There's been a lot of MAGA podcasters and folks that were pro-Trump breaking with him over the war. But there's something that Megyn clearly, like, something snapped in her mind this week. And I think it was after Donald Trump threatened genocide against the Iranian people, not the regime, the people of Iran. And here's what Megyn Kelly had to say just yesterday.
I don't know about you, but I am sick of this shit. I'm sick of it. Can't he just behave like a normal human? I mean, honestly, like the president, 3D chess, shut up. Fucking shut up about that shit. You don't threaten to wipe out an entire civilization. We're talking about civilians just casually in a social media post. You know, like I am the first to try to understand Trump and his strategy and to not freak out over his weird social media posts and language that is loose and incendiary. Truly, I've lived with it for 10 plus years. I learned it the hard way when I was on the receiving end of it for 9 months. And truly, I think that was a gift to me in many ways because it helped me really come to understand what he does with his social media. But this is completely irresponsible and disgusting.
Maritza?
Okay.
I thought that was epic. Go ahead.
So, yes, it's an epic clip. And, you know, we have to commend her for saying that and for making those comments. But, like, she was literally, she was the one that he tweeted about the blood coming out of her everywhere, right? I mean, how has it taken her to this point to just really say that? And, you know, she's also said before, like, oh, well, if he uses nukes, it's better than the Democrats. I mean, again, like, there needs to be an off-ramp and there needs to be a welcome for people to say, okay, I was wrong. And at the same time, Megyn Kelly has just flip-flopped so much on these issues. And for her to say this now, it's just, I mean, where has she been?
Totally. That's why I say she's honorary mention. She's not official joining the Defiance. And Nicole Wallace made a good point tonight on the program. As I'd mentioned, that on Defiance, we were talking this week about how more Republicans can stand up, that we've got the 39 retiring Republican members of Congress who actually could do something right now to keep the president in check, and that we've got Megyn Kelly and Joe Rogan and these other people going out there. And Nicole made a good point. She said, let's take the Megyn Kelly stuff with a grain of salt, because she's probably going to be running for president in 2028. Tucker Carlson's probably going to be running for president in 2028. They see the writing on the wall. Donald Trump is a lame duck. They're trying to differentiate themselves. And yet, I have to say, it's having an impact. Is these folks breaking with Donald Trump, whether or not it's for their own personal ambitions, is making their followers more hesitant to stick with the guy. In fact, to put it really bluntly, they're making it pretty uncool, pretty cringe to support Donald Trump. And I think that that's a good thing. I mean, I think that the huge fracture we're seeing in the MAGA movement is significant. And, we've got a very diverse and growing Defiance in this country. I mean, I got to tell you, I don't know about your social media algorithms, but Marjorie Taylor Greene is popping up on almost every single app I have. That's not to say that we've sort of cleaned up every comment that she's ever made about Jewish space lasers and the anti-Semitic tropes and, derisive things she said and anti-Black and the whole thing.
Shooting, yeah.
But you know what? As you were saying, it's never too late to do the right thing. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think, is doing a much better job than Megyn Kelly of trying to atone. And she's saying, I was wrong. This thing is a cult. We were brainwashed. And you know who it made me think of? It made me think of my good friend, Stephanie Grisham. And Stephanie she's been very blunt about that. I mean, I was never MAGA. I went into the Trump administration, but you don't have to be politically MAGA to have been in there. I've always been a Reagan Republican. Stephanie was MAGA. And she talks about that sort of cultish leader worship brainwashing that happened. And I've been impressed that Marjorie Taylor Greene has gone out and done that. Why? Well, not because I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is, going to be somehow amazing, leader of integrity and a next president, but because she's making it easier for other people in communities around the country to say, you know what? I agree. And it's safe to now break from Donald Trump, and I don't have to worry about getting canceled.
Yeah, I mean, the more people who do it and band together, the easier it's going to be. And so we do need to allow space for that. And we need to remember that these folks, whether it's Joe Rogan or Megyn Kelly or, Nick Fuentes, I mean, you don't have to like them, but you can realize that they have reach, for good or bad. They have reach and they have influence. And a lot of people are influenced by these folks. And there is just something about Donald Trump that, I keep bringing this back to Mean Girls, and I had to laugh the other day because when I made a comment about Gretchen Wiener,
it always goes back to Mean Girls.
So I actually look at my notebook. It's a burn book. But I made a comment the other day about Gretchen Wieners, and somebody in the chat said, Maritza, her name is Gretchen Whitmer and she's my governor. It's like, no, I know Gretchen Whitmer is the governor of Michigan. I'm talking about Gretchen Wieners, the fictional character from the movie Mean Girls. And it really is this whole, Regina George is the Donald Trump and he's at the head. And as soon as the base cracks and they start turning on each other, which we are seeing, it's only a matter of time. And we've seen this play out on how many playgrounds over how many centuries, Miles? I mean, that's how it works. And I don't know that any of these characters have the kind of, I don't know what it is, to be honest, magnetic glue that brings everybody together to join in this movement. I don't know that anybody has what it takes to be the next Donald Trump. I mean, he's Teflon Don, right?
Yeah. And folks are going to try, and they are going to look so embarrassing as they do. And that's going to be an opening, frankly. It's going to be an opening over on the right side of the political spectrum for people to try to emerge as consensus candidates, as more unifying candidates. I'm under no illusions that'll happen in my former party overnight, and there's going to be some sort of savior in the party. But it will happen potentially in gradations if this fracturing continues. I realize we're in overtime, Maritza, and of course we started the program late today so that I could join our friend Nicole, but I want to take at least one question from a Defiance.org member, and I'm going to toss it to you, Maritza. Jablonster, great name, Jablonster asks, is there any way the U.S. House could flip before the midterms? And we were talking about this a little bit earlier this week. Give me your take, Maritza. Maybe this is West Wing political fantasy from early 2000s television dramas, but 3 Republicans could flip sides and caucus with the Democrats.
I think about I'm just gonna keep talking about movies and entertainment. We need Lawrence O'Donnell to come on and help us write a screenplay here. But I think about the American president, right, when they're calling people and trying to get them rallied behind their bill. And maybe you wrote that piece earlier this week, Miles, about the 3 that need to come over. I think I'm very antsy to see whatever comes out involving Melania Trump and Epstein. I mean, something is happening. There is something in the water. I mean, if you take even what happened politically where I live in Montana, I'm not there today, obviously, but where I live in Montana.
This is the new Montana, and we're all moving there.
Right. Yes, this is it. Yes. No, I'm at my best friend's house, actually. But if you look at what happened in Montana, we had two members of our delegation, Representative Ryan Zinke and Senator Steve Daines, our senior senator, saying they are not running for re-election at the very last minute. I mean, Senator Daines dropped out of the race with minutes to go before the deadline to file in that race. And so, people say, well, it could be for this or this or this or this. Yes. But this, Miles, you're on Capitol Hill and there is power and you can feel it and it's tangible and it feels different there. And people, they get there and they want to hold on to that power. I don't think we are talking enough about how many people are walking away from that in this moment.
Yeah.
And so I cannot predict what's going to happen. I think anything could happen. And as we've seen, I mean, again, a year ago, I would not have said Marjorie Taylor Greene would A, be out of office today, but B, be talking about, how Donald Trump needs to be removed from office via the 25th Amendment. That's shocking. So who's to say what could happen? I think anything's possible at this point.
Well, look, and Jablonster, to the question about if it's feasible, it's probably not likely. But I mean, that's the reason Maritza and I were talking about it earlier this week, is it's a possibility. And it requires real people to make a tough decision to break with the party and do something extraordinary. It's happened before. Jim Jeffords did this. I remember in 2001 when the Senate was split 50-50 and Vice President Cheney was that deciding vote and there was a power sharing agreement. Mm-hmm. Republican Senator Jim Jeffords said, I don't like where the Bush administration's going on some of these things. And I remember in the GOP, we were furious, but he flipped sides, caucused with the Democrats, and he flipped control of the chamber, I think for 2 years, into Democratic hands. It's happened before. And it's not inevitable that we continue to the midterms with Republicans with that grip. That's why Mike Johnson's nervous. He knows all it would take right now is a secret meeting or a couple of phone calls from frustrated Republicans to each other and saying, hey guys, we're retiring. This guy's acting like a psychopath. Why don't we do something about it? Why don't we caucus with the Democrats and open some investigations or delay some bills or flip control of the House of Representatives or threaten to do it if Donald Trump doesn't stop this policy or that policy or get out of Iran? They have that influence. And people around them, Jablonster, can try to make that an easier off-ramp to go do. I have been texting this week some of the remaining Republicans that I think might be persuadable to try to make that case to them. Do I think any of them are going to respond and say, fine, I'll do it? No. But I texted that article to multiple of them and I said, hey, let me know if you want to talk. Are you open to this? Got some not unfavorable responses, but people saying, WTF. One Republican member of Congress said, WTF is this guy doing? Donald Trump. It's crazy what's happening. One, that congressman, I hope he says that publicly, I'm nudging him to say that publicly. He didn't yet. But two, want him to act boldly. Do something historic. Be remembered for protecting democracy. It requires friends of these folks to push them. So we'll see, Jablonster. I'm not predicting that this is going to happen, but there's a very interesting possibility. Maritza, we got to get your friend John on the program. I think we got one more day of you guest hosting with me tomorrow, at least. I mean, we'll try to persuade you to be with us much more than that. But we'll see if maybe we can persuade Mr. Tester to come join us tomorrow. Otherwise, we're going to ask you to take all of us on a tour of Hawaii.
Well, I have bad news to break to you then, because I'm flying home tonight. So I will be back.
Oh, man.
But John Tester is ready to go. However, it will be a Tractor Time with Tester episode because he is tilling today and he's going to start planting tomorrow. So he says, yes, I'm happy to join, but I'm going to be on the tractor. And I said, that's welcome. Like, let's see this. Yes. Let's see you in action. For all the people who continue to say that John Tester is not a real farmer, I can promise you he is a real farmer.
Folks, tune in tomorrow. You heard it here. We're going to prove it that John Tester is a farmer. We'll have Maritza back with us tomorrow. A lot more to discuss. And Maritza, tomorrow you get to be with us for the first time that you'll get to be there live as we award the weekly Soulmate Award for Donald Trump, the person who has earned a pair of Florsheim shoes because they have so successfully carried Donald Trump's water in disassembling our democracy. So
are they
we will
the
be
right
talking.
Size, though?
Typically they're not the right size. I think we gave Scott Jennings a pair of size 7s, and I think we mailed Lindsey Graham a pair of size 14s. So excellent. Yeah, excellent. They'll be walking around in funny shoes. And before we go, I will also say a big happy birthday to our Defiance.org co-founder, Xander Schultz. We've mocked him all week, given him a little bit of ribbing. He's out of office to celebrate with his family. So if you can, in the comments, a little birthday cake, send Xander a direct message. Happy birthday, Xander. He's taking some much-deserved time off to celebrate with his family. Thank you, Xander, for everything you do to protect our democracy. We appreciate you, my friend. And we appreciate Maritza for filling in this week. And we will join you all again tomorrow at our usual time. We won't delay tomorrow. We'll be on at 5 p.m. Eastern here at Defiance Daily. In the meantime, friends, stay loud, stay brave, and stay together. We'll see you Friday.